Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We were going to talk about the Alfie Evans case, but we'll reserve that right for later in the week. I'm sure some of my colleagues will take it up this afternoon. We ended up doing rather more on the Windrush story than we intended. There's part of me that thinks we shouldn't talk about anything else, actually, until the government does something meaningful, takes responsibility, until the Prime Minister, who enacted a policy that has persecuted and incarcerated innocent British pensioners, does something to make amends. What can she do? Resign. It's mad how crazy politics has become just in the space of 24 months. But we won't. We'll move on, because there was a call to yesterday's programme that kind of haunted me. I'm going to play you about 2 minutes or so of it, just in case you missed it. But the conversation was odd in a way, because it was born of my suggestion that the incidents of bullying and other behaviours on social media that might affect the mental health of a child wasn't as bad as Jeremy Hunt seemed to believe. Jeremy Hunt, of course, has presided over the removal of in excess of £50 million worth of funding for child mental health care. So when he sets up a working group looking at the effect that social media has on mental health, you can't help thinking that he's blowing smoke up our collective fundaments. But Chris in Cambridge rang in from a very different angle, from an angle not of bullying or keeping up with the Kardashians or materialism somehow affecting the mental health of our children, but of access to social media. In this case, it was Instagram, leading his daughter into the worst imaginable experience. And the reason I'm playing it again, and the reason why Chris rang in, was forewarned is forearmed, just to make the rest of us aware of how easily it could happen. And what I liked particularly, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, about Chris's call, about its tone and its content, was that he and his wife are clearly really good parents doing things right. But what we all kid ourselves about when we bring new life into the world is that we can somehow protect it completely. It's why the McCann story resonated so very differently up and down the country, because it challenged our naive belief that we can insulate ourselves from bad luck. We can insulate ourselves from evil completely. We can't. We can't completely insulate ourselves or our children from evil. And Chris's daughter ended up in the clutches of evil people, even though she never met them. The story is a familiar one, and it's haunted me a bit. So we're going to talk to you, actually, about what you do. And there's no right or wrong on this. I just want to know what you do with regard to your children's access to the internet. And if you employ, tactics that the Stasi would be proud of, I'm not here to judge you. And if you absolutely leave them freedom, because otherwise how are they going to learn how to operate in the real world? I'm not actually going to judge you today. I just want to collect as many different answers as possible. And we're also going to speak to a fellow who set up a company, because there was another caller yesterday who'd used keyword software, hadn't he, to find out what was happening to his child, where you can track what your child is doing on the computer from another computer. You can see every button that they press. But we're going to speak to a fellow who set up a company looking at a kind of almost a sort of filtering process of harmful messages, a behavioural analysis using cognitive computing. It sounds quite highfalutin, but we'll talk to him in a moment as well. First, though, a reminder of the call yesterday from Chris in Cambridge.
My daughter was on Instagram following secondary school. When they started there, we allowed some social media access, and we were very, very careful about how to do that, and we agreed that she could be on Instagram with her friends on the basis that we were also her friend on Instagram, and therefore we could see any posts that were going on, and we could see what was going on her social media. And that was fairly successful, or so we thought, policy. Unfortunately, out of nowhere, we discovered that she had been groomed by an online paedophile group who had made friends with her and convinced her to share, very nasty images and videos, and they'd threatened her with horrible things.
So it escalates, doesn't it? You start off doing something that involves a degree of persuasion, and once you've done that, they threaten to share that if you don't do something else. Is that right? I don't want to...
It's hugely, so it's a bit like manipulative relationships in grown-ups.
Yes.
But obviously, these people are, very, very clever and know exactly what they're doing.
And did your little girl think that
12, 13-year-old...
Did she think she'd found a boyfriend or something like that?
Correct, yeah.
Oh, God.
And she knows not to talk to people she doesn't know, not to reply to messages, but they put their web out across all kinds of things. So they go, "Hi, I see you like horse riding, or I see you like Ed Sheeran." And once a conversation begins, and for her it was, "Who are you? Leave me alone."
Yeah.
That's all it took for them to say, "Hi, no, it's okay. We know each other through this group."
Right.
And then over time, because they're dealing with 50 or 60, they're doing it with 50 or 60 people all at the same time, they convince you to become more intimate and share an image.
Yeah.
And it's probably not, well, it wasn't a pornographic image. And then they convince you to, then they manipulate that and say, "Oh, I need more. I'll share this with your friends if you don't show me more."
Yeah.
Before you know what's going on, it is out in the open, horrible threats. So it becomes, "We will kidnap you, murder you, share this with your friends and family. If you don't, video stream, live video stream, all kinds of stuff."
And they did share it after she finally found the courage to come to her parents and tell them the mess that she'd got herself, that she had been enticed into by these evil people. So we'll just collect this hour things mums and dads can do and things mums and dads do. I don't know what is right, I don't know what is wrong, but I know that it's helpful sometimes to shine a light on stuff. Richard Percy is the CEO of a company called Safe2Net, which, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure what these phrases mean, so that will be my first question to him. His company offers real-time filtering of harmful messages and content on social networks using cognitive computing and artificial intelligence to safeguard us. So forgive me, Richard, thank you for your time. I'm going to ask you to translate that first into very, very simple layman's terms.
Yes, that was all a bit complicated, wasn't it? So essentially, we use computers to automatically contextualize the messages that children send and receive. And by doing that automatically, it can determine what is harmful. And by determining what is harmful, it will then block either harmful messages from being sent in the first place and images and video, or it will block harmful incoming messages. And
this happens, presumably a parent introduces this software to their child's computer. Is the parent then made aware of what the software is doing?
Well, sort of, but sort of not. The key to this software is that it doesn't snoop, it doesn't pry, and it doesn't spy. And crucial to that harrowing conversation that you had yesterday with Chris, who was in an invidious position there, wasn't he? Because he was trying to be a liberal parent to his daughter, whilst at the same time trying to exercise some form of control and safety. What we know as a business is that if you try and control a child's existence on their digital device, then actually you run a risk of driving them underground. So if you two were, for example, as many parents do, and we understand why they do, if a parent takes a phone off a child as a degree of punishment, what is actually happening is they're actually saying to that child, "Don't talk to me when you have an issue online."
Gosh.
So our software, it's really, really nasty stuff. Our software tries to recognise that difficult balance between what a parent should and should not know and the rights of privacy.
Okay. So I think you've sort of answered my next question, but I'd like a little bit more meat on the bones, as it were. So what is the difference between what you offer and what a normal parental controls option offers?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Firstly, you've used two words that automatically trigger a rolling of your eyes moment in a child. That's parent and control. Parents, we all get that, those of us that are parents. It's a really tricky subject, this. The parental control software that you rightly described classically gives parents, in this particular field, gives parents the ability to remotely, for example, lock their child's phone. The problem with that is that it's almost like a weapon of mass destruction. If the parent doesn't really understand the risk that their child faces and they just automatically block that device, then, as I said, they run the risk of driving the child underground. The difference between us is, first of all, what our software does is looks for the content that's causing the damage.
So, because some other control filters, they will not allow access to certain sites, but that's almost on a pre-existing list of prohibited sites or sites that contain references to things. Yours is looking specifically at individual messages coming in and out.
Yes, that's right, James. I mean, it's a bit of a blunderbuss approach when you look at those individual sites,
yes,
those individual apps. And the fundamental problem here is, of course, there's over 5 million apps on the App Store and the Play Store. So how have any of us got a clue, quite frankly, as to what is safe and what else is not safe? So our software works very much deep inside that phone and looks at those messages and stops and blocks anything that's harmful.
Where did you get the idea from, Richard? What prompted you to develop this program?
Well, I'm a dad too, and this was 5 years ago now. I've got to say, James, it feels like 100. But we've been working on this, patterning these behaviours. But I'm a dad, and I've got 4 kids, and there they were, buried in their device, their heads down. I couldn't seem to communicate with them. I think we all recognise it's difficult communicating with teenagers anyway, and so that grunt mode combined with using a mobile phone is nigh on impossible. So I decided, quite frankly, the best way I was going to communicate was to understand these social networks myself. And as I started looking at it, I started seeing all this horrific abuse, aggression, sextortion, grooming, and all these sorts of things. And I have a background in behavioural analytics, and I just felt that this actually was a problem that could be fixed. And we all talk about the Facebooks and the Googles of this world, and I think many people like me fall into the same trap as I did 4 or 5 years ago, believing that they can't fix this. Well, I believe they can fix it. SafetyNet is a British company. It employs just under 40 people, and we've developed the technology to fix this. So do I think that the Facebooks of this world could do it? I'm absolutely convinced they could do it.
Although we're all on a crash course at the moment in learning that Facebook and similar won't do anything unless they feel that they absolutely have to. So we shall watch with interest whether or not that your work moves into the category of something they take responsibility for. Just for again, in layman's terms, what is it looking for? Language and certain images. How does it recognise the stuff that's hazardous, and what does it do when it recognises it?
Yeah, so it's looking predominantly for behavioural patterns. So you and I are having a nice, calm conversation.
Yeah.
If I started to be abusive to you, raise my voice and start swearing, you will probably cut me off. Maybe you'll go quiet. Maybe you'll be abusive back. But the one thing you'll definitely do is change the behaviour that you've had so far in this conversation.
Yeah.
So it's looking for those changes in behaviour. It's clearly also looking at the language that's being used. And as we all know, it's tribal speak online, it's text speak, it's emojis. But also, and perhaps most crucially, it's looking at images. So the software is capable of detecting nudity, violence, and gore. So the way it works is that it starts to determine that there is a conversation. Let's talk about sextortion here. It starts to determine that there is an intimate discussion happening. And it starts to then advise the child of the risks in real time. So it sends the child messages. If the software thinks that there is a risk that the child could be about to take an inappropriate image, then it will lock the camera. And then in time, if the risk continues, if the child persists, it can lock the device or lock the apps that the child is using. The parent is then notified of the risk, but the parent never gets to see the message or the image that the child is attempting to send.
Gosh. How can people find out more, Richard?
Well, it's available right now on the Google Play Store. Check out the Safety Net website and so on. But yeah, please do look at it. You know, we are absolutely passionate about safeguarding children online. I mean, that call from Chris yesterday was harrowing for all of us, and we're just here to try and make a dent into that sort of problem and change the lives of kids online.
Thank you very much indeed. Richard Percy is the CEO of Safe2Net, about which, as he said, you can find out more at their own website or at the usual app stores. And I stressed before I spoke to Richard that there will be myriad responses to these problems. I wanted to begin with an expert one, a commercial one as well, but also to recognise that none of us are going to get it 100% right, although I think it would be hard to listen to Chris from yesterday and then to Richard today and not draw a conclusion based upon both conversations. It's 20 minutes after 12. Sarcasm on Twitter doesn't really work, does it? I just did a double take at someone who's retweeted my comments about Windrush this morning, demanding some form of resignation from the government, and Ashley tweeted another example of the Tory stooge at Mr James O'B going after Corbyn, and then I realised he's taking the mickey out of the people who accuse me so nonsensically of such a position. But we digress. We're doing this in a slightly different way. I enjoyed speaking to Richard. He did, as a few of you have mentioned, he's a very clever man who seems to have hit upon a very urgent need for children's use of computers to be in some way monitored. See, controlled, policed, these are not healthy words when a young person is on the cusp of adulthood and exploring independence. So his company, Safe2Net, has developed software which, well, you heard, which keeps an eye on things and intervenes to suggest to the child that they may want to think twice about doing what they're currently doing, and in the final analysis will actually shut down some of the apps, so access to the camera and similar. I'm going to find out a lot more about that later tonight after I've spoken to Mrs O'Brien. I have a 12-year-old daughter. She's my oldest. Got no worries at all on this score, but equally you wonder what you can do, which is why this half hour or so of the programme that's remaining, I'm not asking what's right and what's wrong, I'm just asking what you do. What do you do? What do you do? 0345 6060973. Because it is weird how technology has changed some of the traditions of parenting. You can't ask your mum for advice on this. You can ask her for advice on most things, but you can't ask her for advice on internet. Although you could ask my mum. She's got an opinion on every subject under the sun, but she doesn't have much experience of internet access. So I don't know how much use her advice would be. That's the question. What do you do? How far do you go? 0345 6060973. And equally, we should also, albeit I only want you to do this if you feel you have something that would constitute a warning to the rest of us. I don't want any vicarious or voyeuristic flavour to this conversation. If you have had bad experiences in this field, what have you learned from them? Tell us what they are and what you've learned. Phone lines are open. My apologies to everyone who was still waiting to talk about Windrush, but I'm going to use all my phone lines for this. I've currently got 3 free, so if you want one of them, you know what to do. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Alan is in Barnet. Alan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. We at home just don't give the kids access to the internet. We just don't do it.
How old are they?
There's two boys first, 9 and 11, and then 12-year-old daughter. She's just started secondary in September, and then my eldest is 19, but she works full-time, so it's a different story. But
you've got a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. I mean, are they ever allowed on the internet?
Only to do their homework, yeah.
And isn't that a bit like our parents not letting us watch television back in the day? I mean,
no, they watch TV.
No, I know. I'm drawing a comparison between the generations. There was a kid on my street growing up who wasn't allowed to watch ITV, and it just felt weird then, and it feels weird now. Is it not a little bit extreme?
No, I don't think so. It's virtually impossible to police as a parent, I believe, and
you can't police life either, can you? I mean, the internet really is the popular culture references that they're missing out on will leave them in the corner during 50% of playground conversations.
I disagree. I disagree totally. I disagree totally. They are really social kids. They've got groups and they do boxing and swimming and gym and dance and football, and they've got friends at school. They talk. They make play dates.
No, of course, but that's the other 50%. I mean, who's your favourite YouTuber? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? How do you play that game? All of these things are part of childhood.
Yeah, I'm not into it.
Well, I know you're not, but
I just won't. I won't have my kids validating themselves in any way, shape, or form through the internet. I just won't. I won't have it in my house. When she first started secondary, she had a little WhatsApp group on my wife's phone. She had one little group with the first group of friends she had, who are just like her. They don't have mobile phones. They don't, they're active kids, because that's who she emulated towards first.
So when will they be allowed to access the internet?
When they're older.
Yeah, how old?
I don't know. They have, like I say, they have access to the internet, but it's in the main room. She has her back to the room, so I can see the screen. There's no social networking at all.
And this question might sound a bit unfair, but it isn't, I promise you. I'm just really interested in your answer. Are they allowed to read whatever books they want, the 12-year-old?
Absolutely.
So what is it that the internet threatens? Albeit because I mean, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but the kind of horror stories that we've covered on this programme, that would be less than a fraction of 1% of what goes on the internet.
No, I agree with that.
So what is it that is to be feared online that isn't to be feared from other platforms?
When my eldest was younger, I saw a very interesting programme called Education versus Pornography. I think it's Channel 4 thing.
Yeah, I'm just losing the phone line now. So you're worried that they'll look at pornography?
No. But the interesting thing was one of the child psychiatrists who was a guest on the show, he said, the first three letters of any website is www, World Wide Web, right? So if your children have access to the World Wide Web, the World Wide Web has access to them. And he sort of ended by saying, listen, leaving your kids on the internet by themselves is tantamount to taking them down to central London, stripping them naked, giving them a fiver and saying, I'll see you at home.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. That has really
But it's not true, though, is it? Have you been on the internet?
Yeah, but...
Did you feel like you were stripped naked in Trafalgar Square with a £5 note?
Yeah, but I'm 40, James.
No, but it doesn't matter, does it? It's the internet that does it, not the number on your birth certificate.
No, but the point is, there are people older than me who run IT companies really successfully, and they didn't grow up with it either.
No, but that's a bit like saying, we did fine before telephones and computers existed. Of course we did, but it's such an intrinsic part of life. Well, I wish you well, and clearly it's all going great, and long may that continue. But I don't know. It just seems to me that the benefits are so huge that to deny them entirely to a child would be to potentially throw the baby out with the bathwater. Then again, if it avoids your family ending up in the kind of situation that some of my callers have ended up in, I applaud you all the way home. There's no right or wrong. And, of course, the problem with that observation is that automatically we'll all try to be persuading ourselves that what we're doing is right and what other people do is therefore wrong. But such is life. I worry... I thought talking to Richard Percy from Safe to Net, it was really interesting what he used, the language that he used, and the more you police, and that is the word I'll use in this context, what your children do on the internet, the more likely they are to hide it from you, I would have thought. Don't you? 0345 6060973 is the number to call if you want to tell me what you do. John's in Gravesend. John, what would you like to say?
Hello. I mean, my son is 10, and he's just sort of getting into the world of getting online. So he plays games online, but he hasn't got access to WhatsApp or Facebook or any of those sort of social media sites yet. But we've always had an agreement that whatever he does online is open and honest. So he will come to me and say, can I get this upgrade? Can I get this download?
Yeah.
And we'll go through it together before I say yes or no, you can't. But I've always said to him, whatever you do online, I will check your messages. I will check who you're friends with. I will check your YouTube channel. Not in a because I will then take it away from you threat, but that his experience online will be one that I'll be part of, and so will my wife. And he's always agreed that and he understands, and we've sat down and spoke to him about why that is. We've never hidden anything from him about what could go wrong online.
I know, nor have we. And I mean, neither of us sound like the kind of person who thinks that they're foolproof or they've got it all dead right. But can I ask you a slightly personal question?
Of course.
When did you see your first... How old are you, to start with?
I'm 38.
38. I don't know if this will work for you then. There's a slightly different age gap. When did you see your first porno mag?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point.
Why are you stumbling and stuttering already, John? It was 25 years ago, mate. It's all right. It's all right.
I would say I was sort of late teens, though. Because
quite late then.
I was quite shy as a teenager, and I can see that in my oldest son, and that sort of worries me as well. His sort of naivety worries me. That you know, what do you tell him, and when do you tell him, and what do you allow him to find out himself? And so I just think the whole thing scares the life out of me, being online. Because there's one thing looking at, you know, a magazine when you're 15, 16.
I was thinking 12, 13, actually.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
But when you can just type it in to Google or whatever you use and find it online.
Yeah, but this was the point I was meaning. Once you discover the, you know... Once you reach puberty, there you go. Found a diplomatic way of putting it. You think of little else, mate. And if it is all there at the push of a button, and he knows his mum and dad keep quite a close eye on what he does online, isn't he just going to do it away from your prying eyes?
And I think that will happen whatever approach you take.
Yes,
you can't stop that. But we try to sort of talk to him and just feed him little bits of information at a time, so that if he does come to the point where he's got to make that choice, he's got all the information, or as much information as we can give him, that he makes the right choice.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. I think, you know, I do check it. I don't check his messages every day. I might check it once a month. But what frightens me is what I don't know about the internet. And actually listening to the guy from, was it Safe to Net?
Yes.
You know, I'm on my way to work, but as soon as I get there, I'm going to be looking it up to see how I get it and how it works.
Yes.
Because I think what you don't know is where the danger lies.
And that is, I guess, both our generations. You're 8 years younger than me, and we already have children who arguably are more literate with some of these new technologies than we are.
Yeah. Exactly, and he can do things online that I don't even know exist.
Mate, I didn't even know you could tell the Sky Remote what to do with your voice until I saw my 9-year-old do it 6 months ago.
Exactly. So there's things that you don't even know you don't know.
You sound like Donald Rumsfeld now, John.
But I think it's just about giving them the information, you know, and
well, that's why I worried slightly, and only slightly, because there is no right and wrong, as we keep saying, about the previous caller whose approach was the scorched earth absolute. They're not allowed to do anything, because I think that historically can encourage children to do stuff in secret.
Yeah, and as a parent, that can be your default setting, can't it? Right, if I cut it out and I get rid of it, then it can't do them any harm. But they will, like you said, they will find a way. They will do it, whether you know they're doing it or you don't know they're doing it.
This is it, isn't it? And important, I think, even though it flies in the face of what people with a job like mine are supposed to do, it's important not to do a kind of my way or the highway type approach. John, thank you very much indeed. I can't believe late teens before he got his hands on a dirty magazine. Someone tweeted while I asked him that question, and I misunderstood it at first. Someone tweeted, says, I bet he says Fiesta or Escort. And I was about to say, we don't really do motoring issues on this programme. Lisa is in Hoddesdon. Lisa, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Just wanted to say, totally agree with the caller you just had on.
Yeah.
I was jumping up and down at the previous one with the guy sticking his head in the sand thinking his problem's going to go away. I had to ring in. Basically, it's all about education. I'm 47 years old. None of this existed when I was a kid. It was get out there, you know, over the swings, have a good time, kick a ball about. I've got 2 children, one nearly 14, the other one 11, just about to go to secondary school. My son is really into computers and gaming and his phone and Snapchat. He has Snapchat and he has the other one, not Facebook, the other one.
Instagram.
I can't remember the name of it now. Instagram, that's it.
And how much?
And he has those.
Yeah.
But basically, what we always do is we always have conversation over them. We're always touching base with each other. We're always having conversations like you had with yesterday on your show.
Yes.
Came home last night, sat at the dinner table, and we said, this is what we heard on LBC, my husband and I, because we always listen to LBC.
Oh, good.
This is what we heard. This is how it is out there, whether you're out in the playground or whether you're online. The same people exist. You've got to be diligent. You can't stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not going to happen. Things do happen in life, whether they're 10...
Oh, you've nailed it. You've done that thing, of course.
20,
yeah, because...
always.
Yeah, but you've done that thing. You're so clever, because I fall into the trap of thinking that the technology has changed the game. And you've dragged us back to the recognition that the game remains the same. The technology just changes the way in which it's played slightly. It's still the same game. So it's still the same message that we got when... Are you nearer my age than... Where are we? Do you remember Charlie the Cat?
Yeah, well, I'm 47, so...
Yeah, you must remember Charlie the Cat. The Prodigy sampled it in a dance track, I think. But you I mean, don't you know, the man who says, do you want to see some puppies, or who offers you sweets in the park? These are the same lessons and messages. It's just the medium that's changed.
Yes, exactly. We said exactly the same thing that was on the table last night. I said to my son, and my daughter sits there as well, and we have a watered-down version for her, because she's only 11.
Yes, of course.
14. So that's what you do. But basically, in our house, this is how it works best for us. I'm not saying, you know, we're perfect parents. I'm not saying that, you know, we don't fall short sometimes, but we try to bring it back every time, so we're all comfortable talking about certain things. If my son comes home and says to me, oh, someone might have shown me this on their phone, what's it about? We'll have a conversation about it. It's not just about...
it's easier said than done, though. You sound a bit... You're like I tried to be, and like my mum was when I was young, and I could talk to her about absolutely everything.
Yeah, very open.
But it's easier said than done.
I'm the one that has the burden of conversation with my son and my daughter.
And there goes the phone line. I hear you, and I believe you. But my view is that light and conversation, information, knowledge... That's what empowers you. But I do also understand why, given the scale and the speed of change, that some people prefer to batten down the hatches. Right, thank you, Lisa. Moving on, just because the phone went a bit funny. Ryan is in Basildon. Ryan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
I work in a academy group, and we're in the IT department, so we know a fair bit about this. I would say in the last 10 years, it's moved away from more pornographic websites to what the kids can do on their mobile phones. And certainly with what your previous caller said, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, I would say they are the worst ones, because children, as children are, they swap pictures. Some of the pictures can get more and more in depth, and before they know it, as soon as they send the picture on somebody else, they've lost total control over it.
How big an issue? I mean, how often do you come across it?
It's rare,
yeah.
But it does happen.
And if it happens to you, it's going to tear your child's life apart, and argue and your life as well. But it's important to remember the rarity of it, rather than to necessarily legislate for the exceptions. But it's education then, isn't it? It's like everything else. It's like Lisa was explaining so well. You need to tell your kids what can and does happen.
Yeah, I mean, in secondary schools, you know, all the children have yearly do's and don'ts on the internet. You know, be careful what you send people to, who you chat to, those type of things. But equally, it boils down to the parents at home that we feel, you know, they should take more of an interest in what they've got on their children's phones, how they're using them. Are they on?
See, this is where this is where I will perhaps slide very slightly into being judgmental, having said that I wouldn't be, because if you leave your children in possession of this technology unchecked, you are essentially leaving the front door unlocked, aren't you? You are leaving them exposed. But you can be too checked, and you can be not checked enough. This is the delights of parenting. How old are your children?
I have 5, ranging from 6 weeks to a daughter that's about to start secondary school in September.
How come you're awake?
I've got that.
I can't believe it. You sound very bouncy. You're 6 weeks old at home, and then 5 others, or 4 others, was it?
4 others, yeah.
4 others. Crikey, mate. And so the oldest is about to start secondary school, so this is when you step up the scrutiny, presumably.
Yes, I mean, she hasn't got a mobile phone at the moment, but no doubt will be that conversation. Dad can have a phone. Ooh. And obviously working in schools, a bit hesitant, but they need that education, need their freedom, so it's both well.
Right, I'm just chuckling, because one of the He hangs around like a bad smell on this programme. Wayne from Basildon has just tweeted to say, another caller from Basildon talking sense. Good job, Ryan. Don't take any notice of him, though, seriously. We continue to canvass different treatments of children's access to the internet. There was another story that actually prompted it back up my agenda after we discussed it yesterday, involving the actress Amanda Abbington, who has a 12-year-old son. She's given an interview to the Radio Times. Amanda normally listens to the show, although she's quiet today, so she's probably filming, talking about how she has an app on her son's mobile which just sort of tracks his movements. I can see the sense in that, actually. You can find my iPhone for that, can't you, if you've all got the same technology? Problem with that is, and I've said this before, you can track the phone. It's not actually exactly the same as tracking the child, but still, I suppose it provides some comfort. And I should add, she's got a new TV series out on Netflix called Safe, and nevertheless, the Daily Mail still describe her in their headline as Martin Freeman's ex. It's almost as if women are considered to be somehow less than men in the worldview of the Daily Mail, isn't it? Kyoko is in Epsom. Kyoko, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm a relatively young mother. I'm 33 with a 13 and 8-year-old.
Yes.
And I think it's been quite interesting for me when I compare myself to my peers, how little parents know about how all of these different social media sites work.
Yes. You mean your parental peers as opposed to your age peers? So because most other parents would be a little older than you.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly. And I just think it's really interesting. I've been putting a lot of effort into a project which I called Protect Kids, to help parents work out all the different social media sites and how they work.
What do you do with your children? What do you do with your 13-year-old? What is he or she allowed to access and not allowed to access?
Well, I think you really do have to tailor it to the individual child.
Well, that's why I'm asking. What do you do with your individual child?
So she has got WhatsApp. She currently hasn't got Instagram, and she's known for a very long time that it will come when I feel that she is emotionally ready to be able to...
It's a good point, that, isn't it, about every child being better known to that. How often do you check her WhatsApp?
Not very often.
How often?
But...
Never?
I would only check once there was some sign from her that something wasn't right.
Oh, really?
And this really comes down to
you check as a reaction rather than as a proactive thing? Because a little boy I know very well, there was bullying going on WhatsApp, but he wasn't the one being bullied, and yet the school got involved and everybody had to delete it. So you wouldn't have known just from watching him that there were problems on WhatsApp that he was party to, although not responsible for, and yet if parents had picked up on it earlier, the child who was being bullied would have had an easier ride.
I think it really does depend on the relationship that you have with your child. Because I've seen social media grow from when I was a teenager, I know exactly how things can manifest and how things can be misinterpreted. And that level of respect I think my daughter has for me, because I know what I'm talking about, means that she actually talks more to me as well. Until
the new one comes along, until the new thing comes along that we don't really... There's always one.
Not necessarily, because I think it's more about how you have prepared your children with the skills rather than how to react in individual situations on WhatsApp or on Snapchat. It's about them being aware of their behaviours and their reactions, and also being able to flag when they think a friend of theirs is also in some sort of danger.
Yes, which I suppose you remind us of the importance of giving them some responsibility for this themselves rather than taking it all upon our own shoulders. Dominic is in. Thank you, Kyoko. Dominic's in Lechley. Dominic, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Probably the first time I've ever slightly disagreed with one of your opinions, but totally in agreement with your first caller. I've got a daughter of 11, son nearly 5. They have access to YouTube, but only when we're in the room with them. Usually we watch it with them, so they're getting all of that latest cultural stuff. But the internet is a frightening and terrifying place, and it's no place for a child. The guy that you interviewed about the software, very interesting. Great.
There is loads and loads of stuff on the internet that's brilliant for children.
There are loads and loads of things in life that are brilliant for children.
And you don't deny them life, do you? You don't deny them access to life.
No, but it's moderated by their parents in some way until they're old enough.
Well, what is old enough? What is old enough, do you think?
Well, I think that's what it comes down to. All kids are different. But, you know, I think 15, 16, you know, start to give them more freedom as you would in life.
You don't worry that they'll do it in secret and that there'll be no scrutiny whatsoever, because what you have is either, it seems to me, there's a wide playing field on, yes, you can have some unsupervised access, but it's important that you understand this, and this. Or you can't have any unsupervised access, in which case, and I can only look through this of the lens of my younger self, but then I'm going to be doing it without you knowing, Dad. I'm going to be out...
Yeah, you know what? If I don't have my own phone, you know, they come back every day, my 11-year-old girl saying such and such in 2 years below me has got a phone, they've all got iPads.
Yeah.
If she doesn't have her own phone or an iPad, she's not going to be able to get that much unfettered access.
Well, she's going to be able to look at whatever all the kids with phones and iPads show her. And she's not going to know what's suitable and unsuitable because she's got no personal experience.
She's not in the houses every day with those kind of people. They don't bring them to school. Glad to say they're in a school where they're not allowed to bring phones in. I can't believe schools allow children to bring phones into school.
We should leave them at that. They bring them into school, but to bring them into the classroom, I agree with you, is very... Well, look, as we said, there'll be no judgment this hour. There's not even much opinion. I just worry. But you know your 11-year-old. I don't. When I was 11, it wouldn't have worked on me. You told me I couldn't do something. In fact, this still applies when I'm 46. You told me I can't do something, I'd become 3 times more likely to try to do it. But obviously your 11-year-old is different, which Mum would probably describe makes you quite lucky. Chris is in Nottingham. Chris, what do you think?
Well, when me and my wife got together, she had an 8-year-old son.
Yeah.
And we basically let him start to use the internet. You know, it was there. But I actually terrorised him one day, telling him what could happen on the internet, what you can see.
How old was he at this stage? 8 or 9 years old?
He was about 8.
And when you say you terrorised him, what do you mean?
Kind of told him a few horror stories of what happens on the internet. You know, you go on there, Josh, and, you know, people will steal your information.
OK, fair enough. Terrified rather than terrorised.
Yeah, sorry, terrified. Yeah, terrified.
Yeah, OK.
But then, to take that one step further, I had the access codes for the router.
Yes.
So I would sit downstairs on my laptop doing whatever I needed to do, and I would access the internet or access the router and start looking at the traffic coming down and seeing what it was.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd just randomly pick like five feeds that were coming down.
Yeah.
And see what the websites were. And you'd get, you know, Tamagotchi.com, you know, all the kids' Beyblades and this, that, and
yeah.
And the one time that he only ever did accidentally log on to, you know, lustyladies.com.
Accidentally?
Yeah, because I checked it out, and for the next couple of weeks, I was all over his internet usage.
Yeah, of course. So you could, you're right, of course you can, or you can do, yeah. And you knew that, you spotted that. But isn't this almost a full-time job that you're describing?
No, because we kind of give them enough rope to hang themselves. And when they do, we cut it off completely.
So how much trouble did he get into when you busted him for looking up lusty ladies?
We couldn't really go at him full bore. You know, we basically took him aside and said, look, just be careful.
That's it.
Because you've accessed this website.
That's not telling him off. That's telling him to be careful, and that is the fundamental premise of parenting. Be careful. Well, it isn't. Some parents have disagreed. A couple of dads think that a better approach is to allow no access whatsoever. Sheila Fogarty's having some form of epileptic fit in the background. I do hope she's going to be capable. I do hope she's going to be capable of presenting her. Do you want me to do your talk up?
I'd like you to do the whole 3 hours if that's okay.
I think they've suffered enough.